Nightmare wedding. My father's shocking announcement destroyed my life. My world shattered into a million pieces on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The air crackled with unspoken tension, a premonition of the storm that was about to engulf me. I'm Hannah, and this is the story of how a chance encounter led me down a path of deception, betrayal, and ultimately, a fight for my own survival. My life took a sharp turn that Tuesday morning when I crossed paths with Chris, a man who seemed to embody the everyday hero. The coffee shop was my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the suffocating expectations of my wealthy family. I sat at my usual corner table, seeking solace in the familiar aroma of coffee, when I spotted them. The Johnson twins, notorious bullies from my college days. "Look who's here," sneered the taller of the two. "All alone. Daddy's little girl." I tried to ignore them, burying myself in my phone, but they wouldn't relent. "I bet that purse cost more than our rent." Feeling my cheeks burn, I muttered under my breath, "Just leave me alone." "Guys, cut it out. She's not bothering you." Chris's voice cut through the tension, calm but authoritative. "And who are you, her knight in shining armor?" One of the twins retorted, their eyes narrowing. "Just a guy who hates bullies." "Why don't you pick on someone who fights back?" Their bravado faltered. "We're just having a bit of fun, man. No need to get worked up." Chris's gaze was unwavering. "It's not fun if she's not laughing. How about showing some respect?" The tension was palpable. The twins exchanged a glance, shrug, and walked away, muttering insults under their breath. His face softened. "Sorry about that. Some people just can't grow up." "Are you okay?" he asked, genuine concern etched in his eyes. Still reeling from the sudden turn of events, I managed a weak, "Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for stepping in." "That was really brave of you." Chris just smiled and shrugged it off, but I was profoundly grateful. We ended up talking for hours. Chris was funny, with a no-nonsense attitude and a surprisingly warm smile. He told me about his job at a local mechanic shop and his passion for fixing up old cars. It was refreshing to talk to someone so grounded and real. I realized how easy it was to talk to him. He listened intently, laughed at my jokes, and shared stories of his own. He possessed an effortless charm that was hard to resist. When it was time to leave, I found myself wishing the conversation didn't have to end. Chris walked me to the door, and we exchanged numbers. As I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. Meeting Chris felt like the beginning of something new and unexpected. It's funny how life works. One moment you're just going about your day, and the next, you meet someone who changes everything. That day in the coffee shop, I met Chris, and little did I know, my life was about to change in ways I couldn't have imagined. Meeting Chris quickly blossomed into a whirlwind romance. Soon, I was meeting his parents. Mrs. Johnson, a petite woman with a big heart, greeted us with open arms. "Chris, and this must be Hannah. We've heard so much about you." I felt a warmth in her embrace. "It's really nice to meet you, Mrs. Johnson," I said, smiling. "Oh, please, call me Linda," she replied. Mr. Johnson, a tall man with a firm handshake, joined us. "Welcome, Hannah." The conversation over dinner was heartwarming. They asked about my life, and for the first time, I felt valued for who I was, not for my family's wealth. The real challenge, however, was introducing Chris to my parents. My father, a real estate tycoon, and my mother, a high-profile lawyer, had standards as high as skyscrapers. The reception was polite but cold. "Mom, Dad, this is Chris," I introduced him, trying to mask my nervousness. Chris, maintaining his composure, extended a handshake. "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, it's an honor to meet you." My dad's handshake was firm, his eyes scrutinizing Chris. "Chris, I hear you work at a mechanic shop. Tell me, how do you plan to provide for my daughter?" Chris met his gaze head-on. "I'm saving up, sir, planning to run my own shop someday." After Chris left, my father turned to me, his voice laced with disapproval. "Hannah, that boy isn't right for you." He slid a folder across his desk towards me. "I've done some digging. You need to see this." Furious, I pushed the folder back without opening it. "I can't believe you'd stoop this low." "I trust Chris," my father's voice rose. "Hannah, don't be a fool. This isn't just a game, it's your future." I grabbed the folder, tore it in half, and stormed out, leaving the pieces on the floor. I was fuming. How dare he pry into Chris's life and judge him without knowing him? That night, I lay in bed, my mind racing. Part of me wondered if I was too quick to dismiss my father's concerns, but my heart was steadfast. Chris was the man I loved, and no background check was going to change that. As our wedding day approached, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of requests from Chris and his parents. It all started one evening at Chris's house, a few months before the wedding. "Hannah, we were thinking," Chris started, a hint of hesitation in his voice. "Since you have the means, could you maybe cover the wedding expenses?" His parents, Linda and Mr. Johnson, avoided my gaze, their eyes hopeful yet a bit too eager. I masked my surprise with a smile. "Sure, I can do that. It's our special day after all. We were at a high-end boutique, trying on dresses for Linda. Oh, Hannah, this is beautiful, she gushed, her eyes sparkling. I caught the hint. Don't worry, Linda, if you like it, it's yours. And of course, Mr. Johnson needed a new suit. Well, if we're all dressing up, might as well go all out, he said with a wink. Of course. Their gratitude was short-lived and soon turned into expectation. Every meeting brought a new request. Hannah, dear, could we add this to the menu? Or how about a bigger flower arrangement? I found myself agreeing each time, partly because I was in love and partly because I didn't want to disappoint them. On the wedding day, everything was lavish, paid for entirely from my pocket. Chris looked dashing, and I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. My parents arrived, their expressions unreadable. After the ceremony, during the reception, my father stood up to speak. The room fell silent. Hannah has always lived a life of luxury, he began, his voice stern. But it's time she learned the real world. As of today, she's financially cut off. A wave of whispers swept through the room. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. Chris squeezed my hand, his expression a mix of shock and worrying. Dad, you can't do this, I said, my voice trembling. This is for your own good, Hannah. You need to learn to fend for yourself, he replied, unyielding. The rest of the evening felt surreal. Chris and his parents were unusually quiet, avoiding eye contact. As we left, Chris pulled me aside, his eyes wide with panic. Hannah, what are we going to do? I forced a smile, trying to project an image of strength I didn't feel. Chris, we have each other. But as we drove away, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. My father's words echoed in my ears, a grim premonition of the challenges that lay ahead. The honeymoon period didn't last long. I quickly realized that my marriage to Chris was going to be nothing like I had imagined. The shift was abrupt and jarring. We moved into Chris's parents' house temporarily, or so I thought. The first morning, the air was thick with tension. Morning, I said, trying to sound cheerful. Linda turned to me, her expression cold. You should start looking for a job, Hannah. We can't afford to feed an extra mouth here. I was taken aback. Oh, I mean, well, your father cut you off. Time to pull your weight. I looked at Chris, hoping for some support, but he just stared at his plate, silent and unhelpful. The following days were worse. Chris had turned cold and distant, echoing his parents' harshness. One evening, as we were clearing the dinner table, he said, You need to start contributing, Hannah. It's not fair to my parents. I felt a lump in my throat. Chris, I'm trying. I didn't expect things to change this fast. He scoffed. Welcome to the real world, Hannah. You can't always rely on daddy's money. I retreated to our room, feeling alone and betrayed. The situation at home became increasingly difficult. Chris's parents treated me more like a burden than a family member. Mr. Johnson cornered me in the living room, his eyes cold and calculating. Hannah, you need to fix things with your father. We need that money, he demanded. I stood my ground, though my voice shook. I won't beg my father for money. I thought you welcomed me as family, not for my father's wealth. He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Family, no, we thought you were our ticket to an easy life. But you're just a spoiled brat with no sense of reality. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The loving family facade had crumbled, revealing their true motives. I was a means to an end, nothing more. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. The walls of the room felt like they were closing in on me. I was trapped in a house with people who saw me as nothing more than a cash cow. I missed my old life, but I was determined not to run back to my father. I had to figure this out on my own. As the days passed, I was stuck in a loveless marriage, the harsh reality of my new life nothing like the fairy tale I had envisioned. I was in a battle, not just for my independence but for my dignity and self-worth. Living in Chris's parents' house, I was starting to feel the walls closing in on me. The atmosphere was tense, and the kindness I once saw in Chris and his family had completely vanished. Then, things started to disappear. First small items, then something big. One morning, I noticed my engagement ring wasn't on my bedside table where I usually kept it. Panicking, I searched the room, but it was nowhere to be found. Chris, have you seen my ring? I asked, trying to keep the worrying out of my voice. He shrugged, not even looking up from his phone. Maybe you misplaced it. It'll turn up. But it didn't. A few days later, I confronted Linda about it. Linda, my engagement ring is missing. It's really important to me. Her response was cold, devoid of the warmth I once knew. Maybe you should be more careful with your things, Hannah. I couldn't believe her indifference. That ring was the last symbol of the love Chris and I shared. Then more items started disappearing. A pair of earrings here, a designer handbag there, one item at a time. One evening, I caught Linda rummaging through my closet, a pair of my shoes in her hand. What are you doing? I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. We need money, Hannah. These things are just sitting here. I was incredulous. You're selling my things, how could you? Chris walked in, overhearing the confrontation. Hannah, We're struggling here. I felt betrayed and alone. So you're okay with this? With your parents selling my belongings, he avoided my gaze. We have to get by somehow. Night after night, I was living with people who saw me as nothing more than a source of income, disposing of my possessions without a second thought. My love, my belongings, all were being taken from me piece by piece. It was a harsh awakening. The life I had known was gone, replaced by a reality where I was nothing more than a means to an end. My heart ached with the weight of this cruel revelation. The days at Chris's parents' house grew longer and darker for me. I was struggling to grasp the reality of my situation. I felt isolated, with my belongings disappearing and the family I married showing their true colors. But nothing prepared me for the chilling discovery I was about to make. It was a late evening, and I was heading to the kitchen for a glass of water when I overheard hushed voices from the living room. Curiosity piqued. I tiptoed closer. It was Chris and Linda. We need to figure something out. Chris's voice was laced with frustration. I felt a chill run down my spine. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear more. Mr. Johnson's voice was gruff. We could try reaching out to her father, making up some story, maybe a health scare, something that will make him open his wallet. My heart pounded in my chest. Were they really plotting to extort money from my father by lying? Chris's response was even more shocking. We need something more drastic. Maybe if something were to happen to Hannah, an accident, he'd be more inclined to help. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My husband, the man I loved, was suggesting putting me in harm's way to get money. Linda's voice was cold. That might work. Her father would have to pay up then. I felt sick to my stomach. Trembling, I backed away from the door, my mind racing. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a threat to my very life. The next morning, Chris found me in the kitchen, his eyes betraying nothing of the evil plan I had just overheard. Hannah, you look stressed. Everything okay? I forced a smile, opting to keep my knowledge of their plan to myself. Just a headache. Chris's eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of suspicion flickering across his face. You know, your phone is pretty valuable. We could sell it for some extra cash. My breath hitched in my throat. Actually, I was thinking maybe I could call my dad, ask him for some money. Chris's expression changed to one of greed. You'd do that? Yes, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I'll talk to him. Just let me keep my phone for now. He hesitated, then relented. Fine, but make it quick. We need the money. I nodded, relief washing over me. Keeping my phone meant I had a lifeline, a way to get help. As Chris walked away, I realized the gravity of my situation. I was in a house with people who saw me as nothing more than a cash cow, willing to go to any lengths to get what they wanted. That day, I understood the true colors of the man I married and his family. They were not the loving, supportive people I had believed them to be. Instead, they were predators, ready to sacrifice my well-being for their own gain. Trapped in a house with people plotting against me, I was gripped by fear and desperation. With my father's number dialed on my phone, I faced Chris and his parents, who insisted on being present during the call. Go on, call him. We want to hear what he says, Chris demanded, a hard edge to his voice. Mr. Johnson stood with his arms crossed, nodding in agreement. Yeah, let's see if your daddy really cares. Taking a deep breath, I pressed the call button, my hands trembling. Dad, it's Hannah, I said, trying to sound calm. Hannah, what's going on? Dad's voice was filled with concern. Remembering the code phrase he taught me as a child, I casually said, Dad, do you remember my old teddy bear, Mr. Snuggles? I really miss him. There was a brief silence on the other end, then Dad's voice changed, now stern, with a hidden urgency. Yes, I remember. Don't worry, we'll take care of it. Chris and his parents looked at each other, confused by our cryptic exchange. So, is he going to send the money? Chris asked, barely concealing his impatience. Playing along, I said. Yes, he said he'll help us. In our past, the longest hour of my life, Chris and his parents were smirking, confident in their deceitful plan. But then, the door exploded inward. Their expressions turned to horror as the front door was suddenly kicked open. Men in suits, clearly my father's security, stormed into the house, followed by my father himself, his face a mask of fury and concern. What the hell is this? His face pale. Chris stuttered. Mr. Anderson, what are you doing here? My father's gaze was icy as he walked up to me. Hannah, are you all right? I nodded, fighting back tears. Yes, Dad, I'm okay. He turned to Chris and his parents, his voice thundering through the room. You've been manipulating my daughter, trying to manipulate her and plan harm on her for financial gain. That's not going to fly. Chris tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. The realization that their plan had failed was written all over their faces. As the police arrived to take over, my father wrapped his arm around my shoulders, leading me out of the house. As we drove away from that nightmare, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The danger was over. After the terrifying ordeal with Chris and his parents, I found myself sitting in a courtroom, a mix of anxiety and determination in my heart. As I sat there waiting for the trial to begin, my father, sitting next to me, squeezed my hand. "You're doing the right thing, Hannah," he whispered. The judge entered, and Chris, Linda, and Mr. Johnson were brought in, their faces a mixture of shame and defiance. The trial began, and it was my turn to testify. "They had planned to harm me for financial gain," I said, my voice steady, though my hands trembled. Chris's lawyer tried to discredit me. "Isn't it true, Miss Anderson, that you're just a spoiled rich girl upset over a family dispute?" I held my ground. "No, this is about them trying to use me. They saw me as nothing more than a cash cow." The evidence was overwhelming. Chris and his parents sat with their heads bowed as the reality of their actions sank in. Finally, the judge delivered the verdict for the crimes of extortion and conspiracy to commit harm. The judge's words were a blur as relief washed over me. Justice was being served. Chris and his parents would pay for what they did. After the trial, my father and I walked out of the courthouse. "I'm sorry, Dad, for not listening to you," I said, tears in my eyes. He hugged me tightly. "It's okay, Hannah. You thought you were in love. We all make mistakes." As we walked, I realized this was more than just a trial. It was a lesson in trust, a hard-earned understanding of the world's harsh realities. I had been naive, but now I was wiser. My father's car pulled up, and before I got in, I looked back at the courthouse. That chapter of my life was closed, and a new one was beginning. So, Reddit, after hearing everything, do you think I handled this situation correctly? Was there anything I could have done differently? I'm grappling with so many emotions right now and truly value your unbiased perspectives and insight on how to process and learn from this experience, as well as any advice you have about what to do in situations that come up like this in the future and any wisdom or cautionary tales you may have to share.